So I'm going to be talking today about unlocking patient-centricity, the science of engagement. First, disclaimer, thoughts and opinions are my own and not of my employer, Roche Genentech. Now we get that out of the way. So my background, like Simon said, I am the Applied Technology and Automation Director at Genentech. What that means is I now do, how do I apply technology to the different things that we utilize for patients, for HCPs, for internal things. Before that, I was basically on a team that handled all of the websites for Genentech, for brand.com, hcp.com. So you'll see some of the stuff that I delved into in this deck. And most of my background is not in pharma. So I come from a background that is B2B, B2C, a lot of things outside of pharma. Like Simon said, one of the places I worked at before was Kodak, where everyone knows that story. They had the big analog business, they had digital in their hands, and they just let it slip away. So I never want to see that again in any other companies I work for, so I try to push really hard on how to apply the technology in the world that we're in, the industry that I'm working. The other thing that I do a lot is that I try to basically drive impact and accelerate digital adoption in all the places I work for as well. It's not easy in some industries, and it's very easy in other industries, right? So I also come from the Silicon Valley. So in the Silicon Valley, everything moves way faster. If everyone talks about, there's going to be a lot of presentations about AI today or the next couple of days, so you'll see that's moving at so fast, right? Things are changing on a regular basis. So it's a lot of looking at what's around and then applying that as quickly as possible. So let's start with the disconnect in some of the things we're going to look at, right? So this is what patients look for on a website and interested in access. So you can see here the overall demand in the light blue line, okay? What I want you to more pay attention to is not what people are interested in, what they're actually getting, which is the orange line. So I find it puzzling that when I look at data like this, right, and this is like third-party data, where we're spending so much time, energy, resources to try to get the word out on the different, products that we have, the medicines that we have out there, but patients aren't able to get the information they want. So what I want you to pay attention more closely is the financial aspect of it, right? The financial support part, right? We push a lot of that information out there, but people aren't able to find it. And here's another data set, right? This is over a 5-year time frame, where it didn't really move the needle at all, even over a 5-year time frame. So again, on the financial part of it, it's on the far right here, where how do you pay for treatment, right? It should be straightforward. It should be easy for the patient to find this information and get to what they need, right? But then the awareness isn't there. So I delve into why is it that that's the case. And then here, what we're looking to is, if I were to ask anybody here in this room, right, because we're talking about patient-centricity, who should you talk to? Should be the patient, right? And off the left here, you can see 85%, with this is industry-specific data, would say, yes, I should talk to the patient, which is the right move to do, right? But when it comes down to having a process to do that, that number tanks significantly. And then if the question is asked then, do you do this all the time? That even falls off even lower, right? So are we really paying attention to what the patient is looking for in this scenario? So what I started to do was looking at different aspects of what I see in just, even the websites and the players in this room. I started to look at some of the things that were going on, okay? So one thing, here's the literacy level of the US. Okay, so this bar probably doesn't make any sense, but I've overlaid that with grade levels on here, right? This is showing you that the average literacy in the US is about middle school, 7th to 8th grade. You see the cutoff line there. Scan the websites for readability on a majority of the sites of the people in this room. Your readability on the websites is a high school level. 11th, 12th, higher than that. So if I'm giving high school level information to a middle school student. That is not a very high success rate there. I have a middle school child, and if I know that if I gave them high school level information, they would not succeed in understanding and comprehending what is going on there, right? So, and this is just basic literacy. I'm not even talking about health literacy here, right? And health literacy will be even lower than this, right? Because if you look at it, it's going to be harder to comprehend that health side of things than it is just basic literacy here, okay? So then again, I went to different brand.coms for people in this room, and I said, where is the financial information on this website, right? We say it's important, we saw the charts, people are looking for this thing. Where is it on the site itself? So I found it under things like getting started and resources. I don't think that makes sense. As a person that's using a website, again, taking an outside pharma perspective, somebody who's not on the medication or anything like that, I'm just like, here it is on the website, where do I find this information? This is where it is, right? I don't think that's clear of what that is telling me, and that's where it should be, but that's where it is, right? Sometimes it'll be support. Patient support, treatment support. Again, I don't think that's clear either. I'm on medication, I'm thinking that's medication support, not financial support, right? But again, this is what we are doing as an industry here. All right, sometimes we combine the two, support and resources, right? And then other times we call it support programs, support and savings. Because this savings here is the first time you're seeing anything that's financially related here, right? That actually says something that's indicating financial. And sometimes you'll see the word actually savings here on that. And then finally, we find some sites that are talking about actually using the word financial support, financial assistance, financial information, right? This makes the most sense, right? If you're going to look for something like that, click on that, you're going to get that. Sometimes we go a little too far. We talk about copay assistance, copay savings. While I think as an industry we understand what that is, I don't think the patients always understand what that means. Okay, so I think we use the language and reflect back what the patients are using. So part of the projects that I worked on, I actually sat at the call center of our offices, and I said, tell me and let me listen to what the words are people are using when they're calling in asking for whatever they're asking for, right? So I kept hearing certain words over and over again. In my opinion, I think financial assistance here is the right way to go in terms of what patients are using. So if you get a chance to do something like that where you're sitting at a call center or getting close to customer support, I suggest that you go do that and just listen to what the frontline people are hearing on the phones, right? Or even emails or whatever chats that you get, right? So you can get a vibe of what the patients are using in terms of the terminology. Okay, where am I going? So I see this a lot in pharma websites. You're going off to this other site, it's not our site, good luck. You're off to another site that's not ours, not our issue anymore, just say okay and you can go off. I've not seen that in any other industry except when I came here, and I found that very jarring when I first saw that, right? It was like, what is this thing? Why is it popping up? Why is it telling me this? So I know that we can't always put all the information we want on our websites. I know there's MLR issues, there's things like that that maybe come into play, but as much as we can get that onto the website itself, that's what we should be doing, right? So that we don't have things like this, and that we can then allow the user to go about to get their information that they need. If you have to, I get it, we have to do this, but the less you need to do this type of thing, the better it is for the user at the end of the day. All right, so the recommendation here is write your content at a lower grade level, right? The lower, the better, if you can. In fact, if you can get it down to like a 5th, 6th grade level, that's even better. Use patient-friendly language, right? Non-technical language, use things like financial assistance, access programs, things like that. And minimize your links out to third parties. All right, get personal, but not creepy, okay? So across all the generations, they all think personalization's a good idea, right? They like it, they want individuality, they want you to know what they're doing and how they're doing it, and giving them the right information, right, for where they are in the journey of the cycle. And then you look at this on a creepy cool site, that's creepy to cool scale, right? A lot of people think that personalization's cool, right? You should know what I'm doing, you should be able to kind of understand where I am in the journey and give me the information I need at that point in time. We also can do retargeting. You can do this on a creepy to cool scale. Retargeting is less so. And retargeting is when you looked at something on a site and then you see ads following you for the thing you just looked at, right? It could be travel, it could be Amazon, it could be something you're shopping for, and it just follows you. So you can see here, it's starting to get on the creepy scale, it's moving up across there, but there's still some element of cool here, but it's more creepy than cool. Then you can do other things like geofencing, right? Which is like, this is an event here, and I can target this event here. And that everyone in here, I could be sending you a message about, I don't know, another event, right? So that's what geofencing is, and this is going higher on the creepy scale, right? So even though we can do a lot of these things from a marketing perspective, it doesn't mean that we should be doing it. And I think by generation, there's different expectations in each generation of what people are expecting. So if you look at the boomer side of things, they don't want any of this stuff, like why you're tracking me and things like that. While you talk to someone in Gen Z, they're more apt to be like, sure, give me more of that information about I'll give you more, you give me more, right? So think about how you're doing this with your different audiences with the patients you have, because everyone's got different type of patients that they're working with. So just understand your patients more of generationally where they're at with the things that they're going. And sometimes it might be started something simple with personalization, right? Do you even know if the person visiting your website is on drug or not drug? Because the sites that I look at, it's a combination of the two. If I'm on the drug, I'm expecting a certain type of information. If I'm not on the drug, I'm expecting a different set of information. Like, what is it that we are providing the user of the website? And if it's not clear, maybe we should get closer to what the patient is that's visiting the site and better understand what is happening on the site for the user, right? So, in my opinion, if you don't know this question, you should get an answer to that question. And then create personalization based on even that first step, right? Because we can jump all the way to just do mass personalization and stuff like that. But if you don't even understand the basics of what people are even doing on the site, then I think you're missing the point in terms of what it is that you do here, right? So start something simple and then go from there. So recommendation here is know for your user what's creepy and what's cool. On that scale, different ways that you can target them. Use your marketing tools wisely. Just because you have it doesn't mean you should use it. And make sure you keep your personalization simple to start, and you can continue to build on that over time. Okay, know your online audience. So we delved into this a little bit more from the different generations, so we're going to continue that generational track here. So a lot of people already know, people are looking at stuff on like Mayo Clinic or other sites like that, Medscape, things like that, right? Search, that's also a thing that people use. Dr. Google, right? 1 in 20 searches are healthcare related. But social, you can see this, is on specifically the younger generation. The social aspect of this is moving up. And we'll delve into that more in a second here. What's important here is even Google is concerned about this. There was a conference, I want to say a couple years ago, where a Google executive was saying at this conference that the younger generation is using Instagram. I think about 40% of them are using Instagram to do searches for a place to eat and not Google for a place to eat. So for a younger generation, search is not the first place they're going to go. It's not the primary place they're going to go, right? So if you look at this data here on social aspect, on all the different social media platforms here, you can see things like TikTok on the rise. You can see Snapchat, Twitter, or X, right? Reddit. This is where they're getting their information. Whether it's correct or not is a separate question, but where they're going to get that information is this is where they're going, okay? So if you have a medication that is more addressing the younger audience, right? How are you reaching out to them? How are you thinking about this differently than your traditional means that you're typically doing, right? How is social coming to play with this? Because whether you like it or not, this is where they're going to get their information, right? I would say what I'm also seeing is some of the middle generations. I also see Facebook groups also as an area where that's very active as well. And that's a very interesting thing, because you hear Facebook's dead, but then if you actually look at the number of people joining these Facebook groups, it's actually high, right, and active as well. So think about how, your different medications of where people are, where they are in generation-wise, and look at what they're doing in terms of those areas. And then researching brand, like I said before, right? You can see here, search is high for the older generation. Social is higher for the younger generation, right? Of how they are researching a brand. So think about, again, how does that come into play in your world and in your product? Television is also changing, right? So you hear a lot about streamers going higher, everything else going lower. That didn't happen until last year, where streamers actually outpaced all the other areas of television, okay? And streamers, this is more and more streamers are coming on. I think when I first did some of this research a couple years ago, there was only a handful of streamers that had any type of commercials on there. And now, even as recent as this year, Amazon Prime started adding commercials on there, right? Ads on there. So you can see virtually all of these streamers where there maybe YouTube was known for ads, maybe Hulu was known for ads. Now almost all of them have the ad tier. That's not going to stop. In fact, if you look at any of the financial reporting on this in their 10Ks and 10Qs financial reports and stuff like that, they actually say that it's more profitable for them to have a free ad or an ad tier, because you get the payment and you get the additional ad revenue on top of that. So that's a vested interest for them to do. On top of that, they're doing password crackdowns, right? So then that means there's even more users that are going to be. And when they're doing the crackdowns, you're actually getting finer detail, right? Before, like Netflix, people were known for like password sharing, right? So you're householding that information so that you can't even tell who's in there. But now, when they're splitting it out, where there's, let's say, multiple people in the family with different accounts now you're more accurately determining who that person is long term, right? So there's different ways that you can start targeting on that kind of thing here. But I think for this industry, it's if you're planning things like a 30-second ad, you got to think about how this affects if you're going on to streaming, if you're going on to social. They have different cuts of how they are presenting their videos in those channels. So your traditional 30 seconds isn't going to cut it. You have to go shorter, potentially even longer, depending on what kind of ads you're going for, right, in these channels. So recommendation here, understand the audience shifts here, right? We've seen things like mobile in the past. There's other shifts that I just mentioned here in terms of social, in terms of things like that. Be social, be visual, right? The video landscape's also changing as well. I didn't talk about Gen AI here. I think there's a lot of things happening there too. I didn't find good, solid research yet, but I think that is another channel we should all be paying attention to as well, okay? And then you'll see here, Bill Nye. He's a science guy, right? So if you think about what he has done in the past, I think in the 90s he had like a TV show, right? So he started in that traditional realm. But what he does really well is he explains science concepts to young audiences, like an elementary school student. So how does an eyeball work? How does the water cycle work, right? Things like that. He's able to kind of explain that to a very young audience, and they're engaging videos. And if you look at him over time, he's also had a Netflix show. He's also on TikTok. He's also on Instagram with millions of followers. So there's ways, I think, that we can do this, right, to explain the science, explain things to our audience. That is entertaining. That is interesting. Maybe not as entertaining as like another industry, but there's still some level of entertainment that you can kind of invoke in there. But think about how you can be and do things in that realm and how you think about things differently. Okay? So let's reconnect here. So watch your language. Right? At the end of the day, listen to the patient, use the language that they're using, right? Get personal, but not creepy in terms of the technology and the marketing that you're doing. And as much as you can, be more like the Bill Nye. Be and explain the things in a simpler term to your audience and be able to kind of engage them in the way that they want to be engaged. So thank you for your time.
quick, we've got a couple of minutes before our next session. Any questions? Anybody want to break the ice before we move on? I know it's the first speaker this morning, but I don't know if you've all consumed appropriate levels of coffee for open discussion. Anybody want to comment? Any questions, comments from the attendees before we move on? Yes.
Question for you. How are you gathering data on your audiences to then make these takeaways, or more specifically for Genentech to make optimizations to your site experience?
So there's a couple ways that I think we do that. We obviously have ways that we are getting feedback digitally, right? So you can see feedback, things either pop up or just generally getting there. Like I said, there's channels I think that are underutilized. I sat at the call center, right? So so I can hear firsthand what people are saying and doing in there. I did this at another company before. At this company, there was a login problem. So I sat in the call center and I was listening to I can't do that. So what I wanted to do was get back to why are people having why are these calls, so many calls, right? They're 80% of the calls are full. I can't log in. So I went back and I said, what's the problem that we have here? Go through the experience myself, trying to figure out what's going on there, and then fix that problem. And then once I fixed that problem, then the call center got the opposite effect on that, and it just tanked, right? It was not the highest thing on their list now of things to do. So I think there's different ways that you can do that. Every company has maybe different channels to do. Digital is definitely one way. That's not the only way. So I recommend looking at where the feedback is coming in from from your organization, and then figure out, just listen, right? Just listen. If it's emails that they can forward to you, if things like that, you can kind of see and gather what it is. But you'll find out very quickly what the problem is once you start seeing that come off the charts from the feedback. Okay.
All right. Any additional questions? Yes.
Thanks, Kevin. Was very fascinating talk, and also resonated very much with my own experience. I think you talked about, basically the lack of progress and how, most websites, for example, still doing it wrong. If you had to pinpoint, why is it so difficult, right? Why do we struggle for years and years and years and still don't get it right? Is it mostly a mindset problem, or is it cross-functional collaboration that's holding it back, or what is it? Because I think that's what we are all trying to figure out, right?
Yeah, I've heard similar comments before. So I'll tell you what I think where the issues are, right? One is there's a legacy mindset sometimes where it's well, we've done it this way, we shouldn't change it the way we do it, right? That's one issue that I see. But if you bring data, you can change that easily. The other thing I hear is, well, MLR doesn't want us to do it that way, or something to that effect about compliance and something like that. I would argue that somebody that is an MLR wants the patient to understand this stuff easier, because that's their role and that's their job, right? Is to protect you from a compliance standpoint, but also make it easier to understand for the audience. And I think part of that is if you collaborate more with your MLR teams, I think you can move the needle. Because you can just say, hey, look at this. This is confusing to the user. This is confusing to the patient. This is what we want to do about that change, right? I want to make this part easier to understand. I want to put this into the top navigation of the site so people can find this easier, right? I'm not saying jam everything in the top navigation either, right? But I'm saying you structure it the right way. People should be able to find that, and your MLR teams or your legacy partners should be able to get on board with that. Those are the two things I typically see as the issue when I talk to people about why I can't get this done in my organization. So hopefully that helps. Yep.
So agreed, great presentation, Kevin. Just a quick question on the slide you had up there, I think kind of towards the middle. You said ask simple questions, generate different customer journeys. You talked about asking the patient if they're on the drug or not. How are you typically getting that answer and then personalizing the customer journey, the web journey from there?
Okay, so unless you're DTC, people probably don't even know what your drug is, right? So they probably have no clue what the medication is or anything like that. So the first time they're getting this is probably from the doctor or you're at the hospital or something like that, right? So that's where the journey typically starts. But your own data probably show you what is happening, right, in there. You can ask the question, right, with, feedback surveys or things like that. That's one way to do it. But also, if you look at the traffic patterns of where people are going, you're not going to look at how does this drug work or anything like that unless there's specific reasons that you're doing that, right? If you're on DTC or you're doing direct-to-consumer commercials and stuff like that, I think that's a different situation because then you're broadcasting, that's a little bit noisier to kind of look at. But majority of you guys are not doing direct-to-patient commercials and things like that, right? So your data would be cleaner. So when you look at the pathways of what people are looking at, you can see more clearly without even asking the question. So that's one. There's a couple ways I just talked about in there. But if you're going down someone that's pretty deep in that journey, like they're not looking at financial information unless they're on the prescription already. So things like that, where if you can create the content and look at the content in a concrete way, you can kind of figure out where they are. And if the majority of their traffic is in that direction, you know exactly what they are. Does that help? Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for your questions. Let's give Kevin a round of applause. Okay, so we're exactly on time, which is wonderful. And thank you again for the questions. There's always a little bit of time at the end of each session for that specific point. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and obviously I'm going to announce our next speaker this morning, which is Rajat Mishra, who's the founder and CEO of Present AI. And Rajat's got a very interesting background, very well accomplished, and he's obviously going to be joining us this morning and presenting around how AI will transform communication in biopharma, CX in general. Present obviously demo some of their platform capabilities next door. I know some of you have had a chance to meet with them already, but their team's available to connect with if this definitely sounds of interest. And interesting fact about Rajat as well is, I'm finding the appropriate level of humor to inject here, he paid for his Wharton MBA with poker winnings. So that's good if you can do it. So I think he's going to, bring that into the discussion a bit later on. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Rajat as our next speaker this morning.